Well, we certainly appreciate your time. And one of your goals since you've been named to this post has been to make the U.S. men's national team more accessible. One of those vehicles is the open training sessions the day before home international matches. Talk more about those opportunities during the public training sessions to get up and close and personal with you and your team.
Well, I mean, I get the sense in living here since 13 years that, soccer is growing every year more and more, and it's exciting times for soccer in this country, not only because we have a very stable MLS league now, we have a connection between the professional league and the youth development. We have US Soccer jumping in a couple of years ago with the academy programs. Everywhere it starts kind of to develop a sense that we're trying to connect the pieces. And this is huge. So a little piece on that is to open our training sessions to the public and have kids come in or coaches come in and have a look at how the national team trains. I did that in Germany. I did it at Bayern Munich, and it was very well received by the people. I think in general it's very important that we have a very open communication line, that people know what's going on with their team, because at the end of the day the national team is the people's team. And so the more they get to see them, the more they know what we're doing, I think the better it is. So we certainly will come up with even more ideas to make it more accessible.
Moving forward into style of play and tactics, but before that, Jurgen, when U.S. Soccer President Sunil Gulati named you to the post, one of the things that he noted was the fact that your priority was the U.S. men's national team, but he also expected you to be a change agent. When you hear that phrase, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think the most important thing is that everybody's on the same page of what we'd like to do. And Sunil came in and said, we did it a certain way until now, in a very good way, because the previous coach is now Bob, if it's Bob Bradley or if it's Bruce Arena before, Steve Sams, they've all done a great job, So my first job is to build on the foundation that they left, and it's a very good foundation. So everybody involved in the game in this country, and obviously all the coaches now listening to that talk here, they played their part in that, because the game was just developing better and better. And if you look back 15 years from now, I mean, it's just amazing. So it's a little fairy tale story that happened here in the United States. Now I get this opportunity to come on board at a time where there's a stable league, youth development is all over the place. We're connecting the dots, as mentioned before. Maybe 10 years ago, you had quite a few players in Europe. Some were starters, but not very many were starters. 10 years later now, you have about 15 to 20 players. They're all starters in good name teams. If it's the Premier League, the Bundesliga, Portugal, or Michael Bradley in Italy. Another big step, milestone was done. It's the league itself here in MLS is getting more and more attraction by European people. They're scouting here. They're looking for players here. So it's exciting times, and I'm proud that I get that opportunity. And I'll see now over the first kind of couple of months, what things I really like, and maybe I see some opportunities where I say, well, if we do a change here, it might improve our program. If we do a little change there, but basically I take that foundation left, which is very good, and hopefully can elevate it now with a couple of new approaches, and that's what Sunil and US Soccer are expecting from me.
When we talk specifically about the team, there are three words that seem to always come up, whether it be in social media or anywhere online or in TV. Three words: style of play. And not many people quite understand exactly what that means to you. So how do you best explain what you want the style of play to be for the U.S. men's national team? And how did you arrive at that conclusion in what style is best?
Well, what style is best, you will only get that answer once you play in a World Cup and you implement all the things you wanted to implement and you see if it works or doesn't. That's the risk you take as a coach. I'm a deep believer that the style of play reflects your environment where you live in. And living here in this country since 13 years, I think I have a certain sense of how Americans think and how they act. Obviously, everyone is different. Every coach here at the convention has a different philosophy and probably a different style of play. But we went through a process, in 2004 till 2006 with the German team where we defined a certain style of play in a lot of discussions also with the players, because a lot has to do with the quality of your players, who you have to play a certain style. But also, what is their background? What drives them? What cultural elements play into this whole piece? What do the people expect? What they want to see from their U.S. team? And the more you discuss that, the deeper you go. In many discussions, obviously, you get back to your cultural roots. And that's what I said in the beginning. I said, well, I don't see Americans being really reactive to the rest of the world. I think, you have this inner drive that you want to kind of do things first. You just go for it. You think that you want to control the situation. You don't want to always kind of just counter-break teams and wait what the other one's doing. You rather be a bit more proactive. So you kind of throw out these bullet points, and then you think about it, okay, can we actually play that? Do we have the players for that? Or, where do we stand right now? The conclusion is, you're in a transition. I think that a lot of the players now being part of the senior national team program, they would like to do the next step. They would like to kind of move the whole thing a bit more forward and see, how can we play with the big ones in the world. So not only reacting to France, to Spain, or to Brazil and Argentina, maybe one day can we play with them. Hopefully we can one day. If not, that would be kind of an answer that you have to accept maybe and say, okay, then we change it again. So it's a process where you don't know the answer yet. But it's a fascinating process, because I think, because so much happened now over the last years in this country, that the quality is improving. Our players are getting better educated. Our players are technically more aware of things. They're improving technically as well. The physical side plays a role. So there are a lot of elements that all the coaches know that play into the whole picture. But I think it's worth to explore how far we can go with this whole discussion style of play. But obviously, I'm rather a person that goes forward than goes backwards. But still, I understand also that you need have to have a strong foundation. Right. You need to be organized defensively. You need to have the pieces in place, and you need to have also the confidence of doing certain things. So you put all these things in a big puzzle, and you're working on it. And sometimes it works a bit better, sometimes you're not. And then comes the proven point. The proven point is World Cup qualification. And the next proven point, hopefully after a successful qualification campaign, is then the World Cup in Brazil. And that will show if we can do it.
It's obvious that you're trying to instill a new brand of soccer. When do you expect to see some progress? So with that being said, to expound on that, where are you seeing the most improvements in terms of integrating your style of play with this team?
Well, obviously it takes time. There's no doubt about it. And it takes patience. And it takes here and there some setbacks. But the question would be a great question for the players. Working now with me for 4 or 5 months, and seeing, so how does this guy train? What kind of elements does he integrate into the camps? What is he talking about? How is he communicating with us? So I think the players, they got a sense for it, where we want to go from this whole idea, to play a more attacking style of play eventually down the road, because it's demanding a lot from them. They kind of have to switch gears. They have to understand that our comparison is not a domestic picture. We not compare ourselves with a domestic league or what they see maybe at their clubs. Our comparison is a global picture. So I got to go out there, and I was last month in Brazil for a coaching seminar. I got to go out there and see, what's new in Brazil, what's new in Argentina, what are the Spanish doing for being the #1 team in the world right now, what are the best club teams in the world are doing, and get a sense for it. So we have to kind of find ways to compete with the best in the world. So to give that kind of more broader global picture to the players is a very important piece of our education to them. When players come and they play in a certain role at their club teams in the Premier League or Bundesliga or in MLS, they used to do it a certain way. Now, for me, that might be not enough, because I got to tell them, if you want to step it up to the next level, then you got to add this and this and this piece to your game. in order maybe for Clint Dempsey one day playing in a Champions League team, or Tim Howard, for example, or another player finding a team in a Europa League, or to be an MLS player, to be really at the top of his game in his club. So everywhere there is a next level, there's a next step to take.
For all the players.
For all the players involved. Everybody comes from a different background and from different expectations. But I think that is the fascinating thing for a coach. That's what I love. And I love to kind of tell the players, this is where you are right now. I see you have the potential to go higher, but it's you the driving force. It's not your coach. It's not your personal environment. They won't push you. They won't drive you. It's your inner drive that makes that. So I think I can be very helpful in that process. And that's what I'm trying to do. Open their eyes and says, I'm not telling you how I want it. Right. I'm just telling you this is the rest of the world doing it. This is how Barcelona plays, or this is how Spain plays, or right now a young German team does, because of those elements that they implemented, because of their lifestyle that they have, because of their rhythm of training, the intensity of training, and because of the nutrition that they're looking after, and all those different elements that make an athlete a better athlete. So what we are asking the player basically is, you got to give it your best in every element. Otherwise, you miss out here a couple of percents, there a couple of percents, and the coaches at the convention, they know that it's all about the little pieces at the end of the day.
Well, I think that's so apropos, because a lot of coaches, especially at the youth level, are preaching the same thing you just said. I can only take you so far, and I think a lot of the coaches will find that refreshing, that you're giving the same messages that they are as well. Let's talk some more specifics about the formation. We've seen a 4-2-1-3. We've seen a 4-1-2-3. The two constants so far in that regard have been the 4 in the back, the 3 up top. Then at the end of the year, you went back to a much more conventional 4-4-2. So it begs the question, what is your preferred tactical formation right now for this team?
Well, to be honest, I don't have a preferred system. It's not that I'm a 4-3-3 fanatic and talk only about Barcelona. We love to watch Barcelona, all of us.
We do.
But if it's a 4-4-2 that kind of reflects all the strengths of this team, then let it be a 4-4-2. If it's a diamond with a 4-4-2 or flat 4, if it's a 4-2-3-1, whatever formation it is, it has to kind of work all together. It has to give the players a chance to show their strengths. And certain elements, have to cover their weaknesses. So you constantly work on that puzzle. So I'm not a fanatic for one specific system, but I want the team to understand that they're all on the same page. They have to go forward all together, and they have to go backwards all together, which is a very difficult process for our strikers. Josie Altidore, Juan Agudelo, or Edson Buddle, they have to learn to go backwards the moment we lose the ball. You got to be behind the ball. You can give them many examples how now a Messi or a Xavi Iniesta going to turn around and chase the ball back. Yeah, that looks kind of automatic. Yes. It looks nice, and everybody talks about Barcelona that is absolutely the benchmark in global football right now. But nobody talks about the effort they put in there. They run everybody into the ground, so they run more than any other team. So it's not only the technical side of the game, it's the physical side of the game. They're there for each other throughout the whole game. One guy makes a mistake, the other guy comes in and cleans it up for him. So that means, the chemistry of a team is extremely important. You can show that on examples. Messi is not the same Messi with Argentina than he is with Barcelona, because in Barcelona all the pieces work together, in Argentina they don't. So suddenly a Messi is kind of lost there. And so it's with many other players. So we are working on a group of players, an extended group of players that have to buy into the whole concept that you're just one piece of the puzzle, and you got to do that job for that team. And maybe eventually down the road, it was one guy, maybe one diva that we might have, and says, I want to do it my way. He will be gone. He won't fit into the Brazil roster, then hopefully after successful qualification. So it's all those little elements. So I'm not a fanatic for one system. I'm not a fanatic for the Ajax school, which I admire. I'm not a fanatic for Barcelona, which I also admire. I'm trying to do what is best for that team. Now, the reason why we often in beginnings played with one striker was because both strikers were not fit enough to go 90 minutes. As simple as that. So I knew that, one is running out of gas and I could bring the next one in, because if I start both right away, it kind of limits my options in the second half to change things. So after 4 or 5 months in our process, then we got to a point where both, in that case now, Josie Altidore and Edson Buddle had far more energy, far more drive. They understood our game. They knew how to chase people also. And suddenly, they were able to implement it, but still not for 90 minutes. So it's a working process.
Specific individual sort of players, when you're looking at players, are you looking for versatile players that can play a few different places within the system or formation you choose for that match? Or are you looking for outstanding individual players who can play one specific role and do that role very well?
Well, I'm more a fan of one specific role if possible. Obviously, you have to have in your back pocket another card to play. So if a Teal Bunbury is a great striker and plays in a 4-3-3 up front, but you could also play as a right midfielder, then it's a nice to have. And maybe I have to play that card one day. Ideally, I only want to play him in his best position. So I would like to place the players where they feel the most comfortable and build from there. Because I think in his second position, he will lose a couple of percent. So you have the 100% Kyle Beckerman as a 6. I always kind of compare him a bit to Dunga, from Brazil. He's playing there, he sits there, he cleans up, he's an amazing team player. Do I want him as a number 8? Could he play a number 8? Yes, he could play a number 8, but he will lose maybe 10 or 15. He won't be as effective in the second position. That's why I'm not a big fan of big rotating kind of shapes. Players who play a left back, but you can also play center back, or you play right back, but you can also play narrow, and you can play a 6. It's not ideal, in my opinion.
Coaches watching this are always fascinated with the idea of team building, and you spend a lot of time getting best practices from other soccer tastemakers or other people leading in the industry, but also other sports as well. What are some of your priorities specifically when you talk about team building?
I think a key message, and I had the luck, to work with amazing coaches. If it's Carlos Alberto Pereira from Brazil, Menotti from Argentina, Trapattoni, Rehagel, Beckenbauer, wonderful people. I think a key message is that soccer has always been and will always remain an inner-driven sport, meaning it's a player's game. As we all know, we discuss that every year. That means we have to find ways to tell the players and give them the message that they are in the driver's seat. They shift the gear. They do it for their own career sake. So that means for us coaches is, what is our role then? Our role is, to help them to get to the next level. Empower them and give them the information and give them here and there maybe a kick in the backside, but at the end of the day, it's their choice, So we are there to inspire them, We are not there to motivate them, because if they don't have the inner motivation, then the wrong place anyway. So this theme of empowerment to the players, of inspiration, I think is extremely important, because they make the decisions on the field. We coaches can't make those decisions, and we shouldn't. If I want the player to improve on the field, I have to let him figure out what he did wrong. So I have to let him do his mistakes. I have to tell him afterwards, this we could have done better and that we could have done better. But he needs to figure that out in his mindset by himself. And this is a big challenge. I've been last week to a coaching course in Casagrande for the ABC licenses. And I said that as well. It's a big challenge for us coaches to step out and let go. Because the decision-making process is done by the players. And we have to let them make mistakes. And the more we scream, the more we think we correct them and tell them what not to do, the more we lose them. And I think it's really an important point to every year to kind of discuss that topic, because now, there's obviously some proven science out there from sports psychologists or psychiatrists, people that are kind of brain people. I kind of call them the brain gurus. And they're telling us coaches the clear message and say, you don't tell them what not to do. they don't reach that message. Just give them advice what they could do. Give them solutions, give them, ideas, but then let go, and hopefully they can implement it. I think we are not telling Messi, if he should dribble or shoot or whatever. He's got to figure it out himself. And the same with an 8-year kid that wants to discover the game of soccer. Figure it out. Eventually they will figure it out. So it's important for us coaches kind of to step back and enjoy the game ourselves too by watching it.
Talking about player development now, and when you're in charge of the German national team at the club level of Bayern Munich, and now at the U.S. men's national team, one of your hallmarks has been really fit teams that perform at a high level physically. What for your players, what are the characteristics of those players that can play at a high level, and why are they so important to physically be able to compete at that level?
I think it's a very important topic for us in the United States because we can't guarantee our kids an 11-month season. And again, now here comes the global comparison to all the soccer nations around the world. They play 11-month season. So their systems are built with a different stamina, endurance or whatever it is. They're just stronger developed because they play 11 months smoothly through. Now we know what's the demand on our college level. What's the demand on our youth level, different areas and different regions of the country. So if you want to be highly successful one day on the national team level, you got to catch up with all the other teams in the world from the physical side, which is very, very difficult if your system is not developed over many years in a certain way. There's some people that are questioning, said, why is Jurgen calling in a couple of kids, dual citizenship kids in Germany, coming through, military families, don't we have good enough kids in the U.S.? And I said, we have good kids in the U.S., but if you have the comparison and you see some players like Alfredo Gonzalez or Fabian Johnson or Danny Williams coming through 10, 12 years of academy programs in a European country.
11 months a year.
11 months a year, then you will see the difference in their decision making, in their awareness, in their vision on the field, in many elements, and it's not a negative on a kid here, it's just a fact. So with fitness at the end of the day, and that's the funny thing, and I mentioned that before, Barcelona, they don't even talk about that, but they're just doing it. So they are far fitter than the other teams because first they kind of run you into the ground, and then they play you into the ground. And so if you want to be, and I think that's the experience through life, if you want to be healthy, if you want to be aware, if you want to be alert, and mental alertness is a big topic in soccer, then you got to be in a very good shape. The moment you're not in a very good shape, you're getting tired faster, you start to don't see the whole picture anymore, and you get hectic, and you lose the ball, and you make mistakes because you're breathing too hard. So it's as simple as that.
What techniques do you use with the squad for performance improvement and injury prevention? And I will say, the U.S. Soccer website is becoming a very good resource for information on fitness, benchmarking, program development for young players. If you can, explain the performance fitness elements that you're using at the senior team level.
Obviously, that's a bit of a complex topic to explain it right here. I mean, we are very fortunate to have with Athletes Performance, a partner on board that knows it all in terms of fitness, nutrition, lifestyle, and all the elements that players need to know just from a body and from a physical side. I think it's going back. I mean, if we go now into details, what the senior national team is doing is maybe not that informational. It's maybe more important to go back to the topic we had before and say the more you play, the better you get. So your more training sessions a week you have, the more you kick the ball around, and even if it's just kicking it against the house wall or the garage door or whatever it is, the better you will get eventually. It's like if you spend 8 hours a day on the computer, you will become a real good computer freak. That's right. Doesn't make you a better soccer player. So the more hours you spend, the more you do something, your body will react to it. So I think a big challenge for us here in the US is how can you do that consistently? How can we give our young players, a consistent year of soccer? With all these different elements, and you will see that if you stay consistent, and not only 3 months here, another month there, then 2 months break, then 3 months here. That kills it all. So I think you just need to be consistent.
Drilling down, I'm curious on that subject as well as a follow-up. When you assess a player's fitness level, how do you give that information to that player? And then what do you do to help that player either maintain their high fitness level or close the gap to where they need to be at the international level?
First, we obviously sit down with them and we discuss his fitness level, whatever those results are, and we tell him, this is good and this is bad. So whatever is on a negative side, we say there's an opportunity. So we try to sell it positively. so I mean, the less they are in shape, the bigger the opportunity. Right. But the more work, obviously, the more work. And so it is a challenge now because now we have a roster, mainly MLS players, coming in from almost 2 months off season. It's a huge challenge to get them up to speed.
Get their base back.
They all worked out at home, but working out at home is not the same as training in a team and in a serious environment. So they're all lacking something. So we come up then with individual plans for them. We come up obviously within the team group with some solutions, and we build them from there. So there is no kind of perfect one. They all can improve. And even if you go to Europe and you work with the biggest teams there, even their fitness levels can all improve. I think the whole topic is by far not at the end. There's still a lot of opportunities out there. I mean, on a more global perspective, more and more top coaches around the world look at it as a holistic picture. So, years ago we said, if we train twice a day, if we do this right, we're going to be okay. We'll look good. Now, suddenly we talk nowadays about nutrition as a huge topic for us coaches that we were not confronted with 10 or 15 years ago. Now much more because our food is contaminated. It's not clean anymore. So what does it mean, the whole kind of development organic food? What does it mean to us? So globally they all think, you are what you eat. In every coach's ear, you are what you eat. Okay, So what does that mean to the performance of an athlete, of a player? I think their individual sports are ahead of the curve. The cyclists, the track and fielders, they know it's almost down to a science. Now the soccer teams, they start to pick it up and say, we got to get a nutritionist on board. We need to know off the field kind of habits of players. How do we travel? MLS has a huge challenge because of all the distances, East Coast, West Coast, Canada, down south. Then
it's an important variable, travel.
So how do we travel perfectly in order to keep our players up to speed? And so there's so many different elements now into this whole holistic picture that it's different to 10, 15 years ago for coaches.
You mentioned it earlier, and I want to go back to it, how you've challenged all the players in the pool, no matter whether happy and successful at a high-end club or still working their way up as young professionals in MLS. What are you specifically looking for in terms of professional career development? And I know from knowing you for a while that that's just a backdrop soccer is, and you'd want each and every person to develop all their skills. So what are you looking for in terms of personal player development when you're evaluating players in the pool?
I'm looking for players that always are hungry for the next step, no matter where they are. So that means I pick up a Tim Howard and a Clint Dempsey who's doing really well. I want them to do the next step. The next step for these two guys is playing for a Champions League team. So move up. So for every player, there's the next step. There's the next level. So if I get confronted with players that talk too much about their past, I'm telling them you're already done. Because it's always about what you do today and what you want to do tomorrow. If you think about your titles that you won in the past, you're on the way downhill. Maybe that's a topic for Billy Bean, and the Oakland A's. But it is true. The mindset of an athlete plays such a big role. So sometimes the players don't get that message. They're not getting it told because they think, hey, I'm there. I'm now European players. I'm in Europe. I always want to play in Europe. And that's cool. No, even in Europe, there are different levels of the game. You can play in a mediocre team, You can play in a higher team that plays maybe Europa League, or you can play in a Champions League team. Even in the Champions League teams, there are different levels. So I want to see from a player that he's hungry always for the next level, that he comes and says, okay, so what am I missing here? Oh, where am I not good enough? How do I get there? Now, that's why I was extremely happy when Arsene Wenger, coach of Arsenal, came into our locker room in France, in Paris, and spoke to the players. And I said, Arsene, would you mind to tell them where they are? And he said, guys, it was a good performance. You're not there yet at that level, but I can see that you're getting there. So he encouraged the team. And I watched the game afterwards and with French commentators, and he was a co-commentator in French, and he continuously gave certain compliments, and he means it that way. So that shows you, okay, they start to realize that there's a lot of talent coming through the United States. But the talents don't know yet, how do I get to the next level? Where is my next level? How can I get there? And that's what is, I think, is really important.
How were Wenger's comments received by the players?
I think they were all encouraged. They felt good. I mean, we just lost 1-0 to France. We should have had a penalty with Josie Altidore in the first half. We had 2-3 big chances in the last 5 minutes. And we felt like, shit, we could have gone out here at least with a point, in front of 85,000 people in the Stade de France. But these words from Wenger, they meant the world, I think, to a couple of guys, because they see now where they have to work towards to. And we have a lot of talents coming through, that they have huge opportunities, huge upsides, but they also need to understand that it only goes through work. Hard work, and they need to learn that a national team player is the first one that comes to practice and is the last one that leaves. That he does always additional work at the end of a training session. And say that in Juan Agudelo, he has to ask his assistant coach, give me 20 crosses. A Tim Remus, give me 50 headers, or whatever it is. And a national team player is a role model, and it's not something where you can say, well, I'm a national team player now. I can do less than the others. That's the wrong key. So if I see that, then a player gets a problem with me. I think it's really important to look at the best athletes around the world. Michael Jordan was always first and last leaving. Lance Armstrong pushed himself over the limits. These amazing, Steve Nash still playing today. He knows how to take care of himself with all his issues that he has. There are players there or athletes that show that every day, and our young players, they need to look at them and understand, okay, I'm actually the one that has to do that.
You talk about young players, and going back a little bit to your experience in 2006 with the German national team, a group of young players, and you were given a lot of credit, and deservedly so, for inspiring and motivating that group of young, unproven players. What can you tell the coaches out there about what you say to encourage young players to really step outside of themselves and really see what they can do at the highest levels of the game?
Well, I think there's no difference between the levels. It doesn't matter if you train a national team, which is obviously a huge honor, and you go into a World Cup, which is very exciting, or if you coach an under 12 or under 10 team in a local club, the elements are the same. You have a group of kids, of players that you want to make better, and you want to kind of empower them, and you want to encourage them to do things and try out and to learn, and so you become kind of a mentor to that group, to those players, with the same ideas as we discussed before. The players have to understand that they're in charge of it, that they have to have that inner hunger. The inner hunger is not coming from the outside. You can't give that. You can't teach that, And I think, when players start to understand that it's them making a difference, they are the difference maker, then that's when they start actually come out and make a difference, or do things differently, or try things out, And we encouraged the German team over 2 years to take risks, to try things out, to learn out of mistakes, to make them in first place, And it's always, obviously, it's always a fine line that you're walking on, because at the same time people want to see results. They want to see wins, and they want to know where the country is, And I got my share load of critics, you know, in the 2 years leading up towards the World Cup for not winning every game and for here and there getting a lesson maybe by another country. But I said, no, but the players are on the right track.
You could see the improvement.
I could see it, and I think every coach now also at the convention has a very good feeling for his own team, for the characters, the different, you know, types of personalities that you deal with, and every person is different, so how do I put that all together? But I think the most wonderful part of our job as coaches there is really that you have a huge influence on these kids, on these players, whoever it is, going forward, you know, so you kind of lead the way, you're a guide, but obviously they have to then implement all the things the way they think is the right thing. So I think it's a huge responsibility that we have. But it's also a huge opportunity, you know, and the biggest compliment that I'm sure that many coaches at the convention get after years there in the whole soccer world is when players from years ago come back to them or see them, whatever occasion, or give them a call and say, hey, coach, I haven't forgotten this, yes, you know. Well, thanks a lot. And I think especially that happens a lot in the college game environment as well, or school environment, and I think this is the biggest compliment a coach can get.
For a coach that is not just hearing what you're saying, but really listening to your comments and your remarks, what are some of the ways, and what do you suggest, I should say, a coach can implement some of the things that you're talking about, but also some of their own ideas when they're integrating their plan or giving new goals or objectives to a team?
I mean, there are both sides on and off the field. So obviously on the field, with all the very different variation of, you know, hundreds of different exercises, you can make a huge difference, and all the coaches know that, you know. I'm a deep believer that with whatever level of a group you're working on, you gotta kind of always work on the edge with them, you know. So the difference between different levels in soccer is the pace of the game. It's the speed of play, speed of thought, speed of implementation. It's all speed related. So the higher you get into the system, the higher the physical demand, the higher the pace. Can you keep up with it? Is your technique the same at the highest speed than it is at a slower speed? And so whenever you work with a group, you have to work always on the edge. That is my personal way of doing it. So when the national team comes together and we do our training sessions, maybe we don't do it that long, but we do it very sharp. You know, we always keep them on the edge, because if I'm not there, I'm not giving them an extra kind of piece of education in a certain way. So everyone with his own group and the kind of level of play that great group has should always work on the edge, should always work. So how can I push them a little bit further and make them understand where is the next little step, next thing to do? Another very important point is that we learned over years, I think, and if I look at kind of mentors for me, like Carlos Alberto Pereira or Bertie Vogts or an Aimé Jacquet that I admired over years, is the way of communication. I think it's where all coaches can still learn a lot. So how do I really communicate with my players? You know, what are the right messages? What is the right tone I'm using? And I mean, following, you know, youth soccer in this country since 13 years and knowing also a lot about the game there, I think we can still improve a lot in that way. I think we can bring messages more positive across. I think we don't need to be screamers on the sideline. I think we can create an environment where the kid really kind of is in charge of his game, you know, because it's a player's game. He owns the game, and I think there are certain elements that we can improve.
Following up, what were some of the constant denominators of those men you just mentioned, some of your coaching mentors, in terms of how they communicated to their teams?
Well, I think one key is certainly to think always in opportunities or solutions. You know, never think about what went wrong and point out what went wrong. So taking the situation where something goes wrong and offer them right away the solution. So you got to kind of reverse it. You know, you see somebody made the wrong decision. You know, he was dribbling instead of passing, you know. So if you go in there and says, do not dribble anymore, you know, should do that. Instead of saying that do not dribble anymore, it's just, hey, you know, did you realize you could have passed the ball? You know, he was wide open. So the way we package a piece of information is very, very important, especially the younger you go, because they're very sensitive to it. If a coach has the wrong tone, if he has the wrong words, that makes or break a kid, yeah, a player. And I think that is something that I observe from big coaches. You know what, I mean, or if you look at a Phil Jackson, how he's on the sideline, you know, how he did that, or, you know, or, I mean, certain coaches of different, obviously, sports and, you know, the big sports here in the U.S., I admire that. I admire, you know, how they are taught to communicate, you know.
One of the things that you talk about is 10,000 hours of focus practice. It was in the book, The Talent Code, and you've also talked about as well the need for players to be self-motivated, to be self-driven. Now, the other side of that is creating an environment and atmospheres where players can get better without it being an organized training session. What are some of your suggestions on how coaches can embed in their structure, their teams, ways for players to discover the game without structure, without cones, without bibs and pennies? What do you suggest coaches do to accomplish that?
Well, it's a tough one because the environment of kids changed completely to 20 years ago. I mean, you know, nobody lets their kids run off the street anymore and hang out at local schools just, you know, because they want to make sure that, you know, they're supervised. They want to make sure that they are safe. So it's different to how we grew up. You know, we could take the bike and go off and play whatever we wanted to play. But I think there's still an opportunity out there where we can encourage the kids, you know, to play extra amount of time, soccer, however they want to play it, if it's against the wall, if it's, you know, with some kids in the park, and I maybe just walk along and hang out there, or if I offer some extra sessions in an uncontrolled way, you know, just giving them the safe environment. I think there are ways to kind of occupy their time in a certain way a little bit better, if it's maybe on an extra day where they have no training session, in order that just to stimulate. So give them just that piece of stimulating kind of extra push that they played more. The talent code, the 10,000 hour theory is certainly right. You know, I mean, a kid that plays in Buenos Aires 5 hours a day will always be ahead of the curve. Then a kid that plays 3 or 4 training sessions, 1.5 hours each, you know, in a controlled environment. But I also think, you know, and that's in that book as well, or other lectures, is that doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. Because now, today and tomorrow, I can make the difference. I can add. So I'm trying to tell the players here, you know what, if you have the time, you can do this extra work, and you stretch it out over 1 year. If every national team player says, I'm going to go for 1 extra run a week, that's 52 sessions. Mm-hmm. That's huge, you know, that makes a big difference. So everyone in his own environment can make actually a big difference by just being a little bit more creative and coming up with some ideas, and maybe invite the kids on a special day for futsal or for any other kind of, or even playing a game of basketball, you know, the run around and do, because we're getting more and more challenged in our society nowadays, you know, with the time management of our children, you know, with all these electronics floating around, you know, phones and iPads and all that stuff, you know, it's taking our kids away from us. Yes. So we got to be creative and find hopefully ways, and it's the same for me challenging than for every other parent, is to, no, I mean, you know, that doesn't really make sense, and it would be better if he plays hoops or soccer at that time.
Player education is something that's very important to you, and you mentioned the holistic approach. But personally, you're a very curious person. You're a person that is always trying to learn. You went to an NBA training camp this year. You always are trying to connect yourself to other professional sports and get what they do best and see how that applies to you. What can you tell coaches out there about what they should be doing for their own continuing education or for their own career development in coaching?
Well, obviously, every country is different. I mean, the U.S. is different. With obviously we have the two models there, from the NCAA and also from U.S. soccer. I think coaches' education is a very, very important piece in this whole thing. And it's an area where we will dig into over the next couple of months, and hopefully can offer more kind of topics and more thoughts and more kind of ideas about different approaches to all the coaches out there. I mean, I was lucky. I played in 4 different countries, and I learned different methods, and I studied different ways of doing it around the world, but then also from other sports. As a coach, you have to stay always curious. You have to always look for the next thing. What can I learn? And for a coach, it's extremely important also, like for a player, to think about today and tomorrow, and not of what have I done already. I think the moment, when I kind of bump into people that talk about, hey, remember there 10 years ago this, 15 years ago that, then I leave that group. Because it's not today and it's not tomorrow, because I won't
go back.
Yeah. So, and I think that's a wonderful thing about soccer. It's always moving. It's always the next game coming up. Every day is game day. Every training session will make a difference. Every talk with a player will make a difference. Whatever you do today will influence tomorrow. So from my personal perspective, I just want to get everything out of every day because I feel fortunate that I can be in that environment. So it's an kind of an interesting time for U.S. soccer now, going into that deeper topic of coaches' education. So what's going on in other countries around the world? What can we learn from them? There are certainly things that other countries can learn from us. So how can we kind of improve all the different elements of the game? And it's something that I will definitely get involved with, and hopefully, down the road, some people will benefit from it.
Was there a single inspirational coach whom affected you most during your time as a player, and how did they inspire you?
Well, I had, I think, about 20 coaches and real big names. I think the most important message I got at one point from a coach was Ari Hahn, twice runner-up in the World Cup for Holland, amazing player, was my coach at Stuttgart. We played the UEFA Cup final against Naples with Maradona, Careca. And I already broke into the national team, and I kind of was a little bit, the big fish in a small pond, in Stuttgart. And he came up to me and says, "You got to move on." And the club badly wanted to keep me. And I looked at him and said, "What do you mean?" "No, you got to move on. You got to move on. It's time for you to go." And I think that was the best message I've ever received, because there's a coach that actually puts his own job on the line by moving somebody on, saying, it was the key player at that moment, but for his own development, it's time to the next level. And I'm often asked, about when is the right time for a US player going to Europe? When is the right time to make the next step? Obviously, now we have MLS players in our camp here in Phoenix, and they all think about Europe. They all dream about. They want to be where Tim Howard and Clint Dempsey are. So what are you answering those guys? And I tell these guys, you can't give a yes or no answer, because every one of you is different. You're a child of your environment, and some players are ready at the age of 18, very, very rarely. Some are maybe ready at 20, some are maybe ready at 23. I was only ready at the age of 24 to move on. So it is a very tricky situation, and I think that we coaches, all of us, play a vital role in that, because they will listen to you. They will listen to you what they should do with their lives also. If maybe now Juan Agudelo comes to me, or Breck Shea comes to me and says, "I want to move on," and I got to tell them, obviously I talk to their coaches all the time as well, but I got to tell there's a lot still that you have to learn. They won't forgive you all that stuff if you go straight overseas and you think you can prove that. You might get 1, 2, 3 months, and then they're going to send you back home if you're not ready for it. I'm not saying they're not ready, but there's so many important things that need to fit before a kid goes overseas. And we see it with Brazilian talents, 9 out of 10 don't make it. Now
we hear about the one.
you only read about, the special talent. Now we talk all about Neymar and stuff. Yeah, will he make it? Certainly he will make it because he's really good. but you don't hear about the 9 other ones that went overseas, and they're coming back after 3 months, after 6 months, and then it comes the next whole wave of Brazilian players going and Argentinian players going overseas, because even overseas they can only play with 11 per team. So it is really important that the coaches become aware of that, and also are very, very responsible in their advices that they give to the players, and be straightforward and say, yeah, there's always a big risk with it, Do you want your player to move up to the next level, wherever that level is? Yes, but you also are responsible as a coach to have a good sense for the timing.
Well said as well. We're concluding our time with Jurgen Klinsmann, and so thankful everyone is checking this out. As we head into 2012, you mentioned Brazil, World Cup qualifying begins this year, and really it's time to sort of get those results you need to get to Brazil. What are the goals that you've set for the team this year?
Well, the goals, obviously there are 2 things going parallel, and it's just normal for every coach in that role, is you need to get the results to qualify, no matter what. So whatever it takes to get those results, we were going to do. So we got to play Antigua first. We got to go down to Guatemala, expecting a very difficult game there. We got to go down there and get the points, and so on with all the qualifier games. So at the same time, obviously, we would like to move forward with our ideas and our style of play discussion, and get the players really up to speed, and force them and challenge them even more to ask more from themselves, and do their own little next steps. So these 2 paths, they kind of are constantly going parallel, and I'm just really excited about it, because it's great to be, in that environment right now where there's so much going on in U.S. soccer. So much, if it's the national team, if it's MLS, if it's youth academies, if it's the whole developmental side, if it's players in Europe that make their next steps and their next levels. I think, if you look back, and I often said that in Europe to many media people, the U.S. qualified now since '90 for every World Cup. It's more consistency there. And the credibility is a completely different one now of U.S. soccer around the world than it was 20 years ago. Thanks to all the people involved in this whole development. And that's why now when you talk to people overseas, they're curious. They want to know what's going on here. They want to know what's going on in the youth academies, in the college system, in the MLS teams, and this is the biggest compliment you can get.
Very small group of teams that have played in every World Cup since 1990. In conclusion here, for coaches or people interested in the game, how can they support the U.S. men's national team this year and in the future?
I think everybody supports the U.S. team already. And in their heart, they all, want to see a U.S. team that is successful and is doing well. On the other side, obviously, when you're in transition, as we are right now, trying to implement a new style, trying to kind of getting to another level, trying to kind of force the issues, there will be some setbacks. So I think it's important for the people to know also that, be aware of that. I'm not saying don't criticize the coach. You can criticize the coach because that's fine. That's part of the game. Yeah, but a bit of patience will be needed because it is a process that we're going through, and we have a timeline that is 2.5 years from now. The deadline is hopefully the first game in Brazil, and then we have to prove it that we are able to play a certain way and hopefully a successful way. But I think, follow us as much as you can and be supportive. And obviously, especially when we have home games, then we need really also the support. I think we're trying to measure ourselves with some big teams this year. We have Brazil on the line possibly in the summertime. We're going to play Italy now at the end of February. That's a huge learning step for our team, And then we're trying always to find teams that challenge us, and the more support we get, the the better it is.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time out in what is going to be a very busy and very important 2012. Best of luck to you, and thank you again for everyone watching. Thank you, Jurgen.
Thank you very much.